Hello friends, welcome back to NPTEL online certification course entitled Soil and Water Conservation Engineering, and I am Rajendra Singh, professor in Agriculture and Food Engineering Department, IIT Kharagpur, and we are in week 2, the last lecture, lecture 10 of this particular week, and the topic is soil loss measurement. In this week, we started with lecture 6 discussing about the soil loss estimation using universal soil loss equation. In lecture 7, we devoted on finding out erosivity and erodibility, which are two important components of universal soil loss equation. In lecture 8 and 9, we went through the modifications in universal soil loss equation, that is, we saw modified universal soil loss equation and revised soil loss equation, and we saw how to utilize them. And the last lecture of this week, that is today's lecture, we are going through soil loss measurement, that is how to measure soil loss. Now, the question is, why do we need to measure soil loss? I mean, that is important question, and we need to measure soil loss because it is helpful in design of soil conservation measures. It is helpful in design of dams and reservoirs. It helps us in designing stable channels and also helps us in determining the effect of the conservation measures adopted in a basin. So, if you want to design a soil conservation for a given area, then what are the, we have seen that in our introductory lectures, we have seen that various kinds of soil conservation measures are possible. There are some agronomical measures, biological measures, then engineering measures of various kinds are there. So, which combination or which soil conservation needs to be adopted for a given area, that will be determined basically by the amount of or magnitude of soil loss that is taking place in that particular area. So, that is where we need to know the soil loss. Then same we discussed about several times, we discussed about dams and reservoirs, that whatever sediment that is transported from a given area, that is detached and transported from a given area, finally that gets deposited into water bodies, say reservoir or ponds or channels or rivers. So, obviously, when we design reservoir, there is in the life of reservoir something defined as dead storage is there, and that dead storage is the provision of storage while designing reservoir to accumulate silt or sand that will come into the reservoir over its life period. So, we already know when we design reservoir, we always know that some kind of siltation will always be there, and we can make a provision for that. So, how much dead storage and how much silt is expected over a given period of time of interest for us, that can be only known if we know the soil loss, or rather if we measure the soil loss in the upstream area. Similarly, based on the soil loss data, we can design stable channels, that is channels we know that when we design channel, we always keep an eye on non-erosive channels. That means, there should not be any further erosion taking place and certain velocity of flow. So, obviously, that will be governed by the soil loss that is being generated. So, that means we need the soil loss data. And finally, if we have adopted a certain kind of conservation measures in any soil conservation program in a basin, so how effective that particular conservation measure or measures that we have adopted are, that will be only evaluated based on the measurements of soil loss or soil loss that are getting generated. So, soil loss measurement is very important while designing or evaluating any of the conservation measures or conservation practices that has been adopted in a given watershed. Now, coming to soil loss measurement, there are two possible ways of measuring soil loss. One is runoff plots, another is by using sediment samplers. So, either of these can be utilized, runoff plots or sediment samplers. Let us take how to use them one by one. Now, question is when to use runoff plots. Now, runoff plots are preferred when we have to make any kind of demonstration to farmers in the field, because they are more experimental in nature. They are typically they are in the field conditions. So, it is very easy for farmers to understand what we are trying to demonstrate them, and that is why whenever we have to demonstrate a new soil conservation measure or any cultivation practice which is favorable, then we use runoff plots. Then for comparative studies, if we want to compare two kinds of cultivation practices or two kinds of conservation measures, then obviously we need to use runoff plot experiments in order to be able to tell which cultivation practice is better than the other, or which measure is more suitable for a given area. And of course, to obtain data for validation of models to predict runoff and soil loss, we have several models available for predicting runoff and soil loss, and I mean they simulate runoff or simulate soil loss. So, just to be able to evaluate how these models are performing or validating the results of these models, we need experimental data, and then in that case we use runoff plots for conducting our experiments. Now, there are different types of runoff plots, and they are classified based on two things. One is based on structure of plot, another is based on structure based on the size itself. So, let us say if we see the based on the structure of the plot, then runoff plots are classified as natural or simulated rainfall feeded plots, or bounded or unbounded plots. That is, two types of classification are possible in these cases. So, when we say natural or simulated rainfall feeded plots, so natural plots, the name itself suggests that is natural, that is the rainfall conditions in the natural rainfall is natural rainfall. But in laboratory many a times during in the laboratory conditions, we use plots with simulated rainfall, and the advantage of simulated rainfall is that so for example, this is the example of simulated rainfall feeded plot. So, here the advantage is that once the rainfall is being simulated by us, so we can create rainfall of desired intensity, that is we can vary the intensity, we can experiment with various kinds of storm patterns, that is a rainfall first rainfall is very high intensity, then low intensity, then high intensity, or high intensity then low intensity. So, all kinds of storm patterns we can simulate when we are simulating rainfall. That then also the duration, storm duration is another variable which we can always capture using the rainfall simulators. So, that means various kinds of variations are possible when we are simulating rainfall using rainfall simulators, and also because they are put into laboratory condition most of the time. So, obviously, it is also possible to use sophisticated measurements by, say for example, we can use various kinds of sensors, we can use data loggers, and we can also various kinds of variations are possible when we use a rainfall simulated rainfall feeded plot, which is generally done under controlled environment under laboratory conditions. And then the second type of plots are bounded or unbounded plots. So, that means boundary, whether there is a boundary or not. So, here we say the example there is a boundary here. So, it is an example of a bounded plot, but if you go just outside to any field condition, and that can be also a runoff plot, because we can say that it is a runoff plot because runoff will definitely occur, and then it can be an unbounded condition. So, it is a unbounded plot. So, unbounded plot are again quite natural, whereas bounded plots are little bit controlled because we are controlling things here. So, that is the based on structure of the plot. Then other classification is, as I already mentioned, is based on the size of the plots, and there are three types of based on size three types of runoff plots: micro plots, medium plots, which are also referred to as USLE plots. Remember, we discussed about the standard USLE plot. So, these are standard USLE plots, and there they can be the third one are large plots or even the watersheds under natural conditions. So, they can also be called as a runoff plots. So, based on the structure, based on the size, runoff plots could be of varying types. Let us go into details of various kinds of plots, and let us begin with micro plots. So, the size of micro plots can vary from 0.05 to about 2 square meters. So, you can see that the size is really small, and that is why the term micro is used. So, the size limitation is that size could vary over 0.05 square meters to about 2 square meters. And because of their size advantage, they are frequently used in laboratory experiments under simulated rainfall conditions. So, this is the micro plots are typically used in laboratory experiments and with simulated rainfall conditions, and they are particularly suitable for studying inter-reel erosion. So, we saw various kinds of erosion processes. So, for inter-reel erosion, micro plots are very suitable, and this is the typical diagram of a micro plot. This is the land slope direction which we are seeing here. So, here you can see that this is really the experimental area. This is where simulated rainfall will occur, and whatever variables we want to measure, we will be measuring. And then at the end of this area, a funnel kind of shape is provided in order to direct the flow and sediment being generated from the runoff plot to a collection tank. And this collection tank, all around this collection tank, metal bund is there to prevent runoff from entering the tank from outside the plot. That means, the flow should only come from the runoff plot, that is why they are protected. And of course, on top also there could be a cover on this tank, so that no kinds of external flow or pollutant can reach the flow. So, this is how typically a micro plot looks like. Then the second type is medium or USLE plot, and this we have already seen that USLE plots or standard USLE plots have certain characteristics. We saw that the length is 22.13 meters and the slope is 9%. This is the standard requirement of a standard USLE plot. So, the usual size of the medium plots we use is 4 meters by 22.13 meters, and the minimum width should be at least 2 meters. So, it should be minimum 2 meter by 22.13 meter, and then it can go beyond. And they are used for validation of the USLE models. We saw that not only validation, but also we saw that while estimating universal soil loss equation, while defining various components, various factors, be it conservation practice factor, be it crop management factor, be it topographic factor, we always said that it is the standard USLE plot which is used as a reference. That is, all definitions they come with reference to the USLE plot, and that is where other term used is medium runoff plots or medium plots. And here also, I mean, diagrammatically you can see that the length is 22.13 meters and width could be appropriate. It said that it should be minimum 2 meters, it could be up to 4 meters wide. And the elevation difference from the upstream to downstream is 2 meters, and if you calculate the slope, then 2 by 22.13, that is 2 meter fall over 22.13 meters length comes out to be 0.09 or the 9% slope, which we have to maintain if it is a standard USLE plot. And other requirements are that the cover is fallow, that there is no cropping done over the these plots, and tillage is continuously tilled. So, they are continuously tilled in some kind of tillage operation is done in up and down slope direction, but no cultivation takes place. So, these are the requirements of standard USLE plots, and medium it is called medium when the width is between 2 meter to 4 meters. So, this is the second kind of plot. The other plot is of course, the large runoff plot, and size of these plots could be at least 100 square meters. So, any plot runoff plot which is greater than 100 square meters is referred to as a large runoff plot, and that is why we also said that even natural watersheds could be called as runoff plots. And these are suitable for studying combined process of rill, interrill and gully erosion. So, obviously, because they are pretty large in size, so obviously, all the erosion processes will take place whenever rainfall occurs, whether under simulated condition or natural condition. So, that is why it is possible to reach the combined effect of the process like rill erosion, interrill erosion and gully erosion together. And these plots represent a sample of the landscape and capture the different erosion phases, which is again quite possible because of their life size. So, there could be natural variations within the landscape, and of course, we have already said the different erosion phases, be it phases of erosion we saw detachment, transport, deposition. So, because they are pretty large in size and natural landscape is there. So, obviously, at certain portions there will be detachment, certain other portions there will be transportation, and there might be a downstream side, the slope conditions should be such that soil gets deposited also. So, detachment, transportation and deposition, all three phases of erosion, it will be possible to study using the large plots. And of course, there are certain merits and demerits of runoff plots. The merits are they are useful in assessing the magnitude or severity of erosion and its effect on soil productivity. So, obviously, whenever we require erosion data or what happens to the crop productivity, then we can always use the runoff plots, that is one advantage. And they are useful in designing and establishing erosion control practices. We already know that we discussed that why do we need to measure soil loss. So, obviously, we saw that whenever we have to design any kind of conservation practice or we have to evaluate any kind of conservation measure that is already adopted, then we always need measured soil data, and for that runoff plots are the best place to find. But then there are certain demerits also of the rainfall plots, and one of the demerits, major demerits is that they are expensive for both initial construction and maintenance. So, both construction and maintenance of runoff plots is expensive unless and until it is too natural and we are not doing any kind of instrumentation or any kind of modification into the natural conditions, then it is natural. Otherwise, if you want to really create runoff plot, then both construction as well as maintenance is expensive. And as most of the things are done in field conditions or in laboratory conditions, then obviously huge amount of labor is required. So, large number of workers are required in order to be able to do experimentation or for maintaining runoff plots. And the problems of collecting samples and recording the soil and water data, they still remain, because it is quite open, quite large, especially if it is large plots or if it is under natural rainfall conditions, then measurements of or collection of samples is a problem. So, it is very difficult to collect the samples accurately. That is one of the demerits of runoff plots. Then we come to the sediment load classification. The sediment is classified in two different ways, that is based on transport mechanism and based on the particle size. And total sediment load, if you talk in both classification, there are two components. If we talk about the classification based on mechanism transport, then we call it suspended load and bed load, that is the heavier larger particles that they are referred to as bed load, and those lighter particles which are transported in suspended form, they are referred to as suspended load. On the other hand, on the basis of particle size, they are referred to as a wash load and bed material load. So, larger particles are referred to as bed material and smaller ones are referred to as wash load. So, this is just a terminology which is used. So, one should be aware of these terminologies. And then the second type of measurement or second source of obtaining the soil loss data is by use of sediment samplers, and sediment samplers are basically used to collect sediment-laden water samples from a flowing water body. It could be river, tributary, canal, anywhere, that is anywhere we want to find out the soil loss through, then we can collect sediment samples, and that simply means the collecting the sediment-laden water sample. And then we take this sample to laboratory analysis for determining the chemical, physical, toxicological or biological composition of sediment. Depending upon the nature of this study, what is the objective of our study, we can do all, or we can limit our analysis to any one or two categories. Most of the time we definitely do the physical analysis. And then samples are also collected to collect scoops or cores of soil from a known silt deposition site, for example, reservoir bottom floodplain, to gather historical information. So, obviously, the idea here is not to really find out the magnitude, but to find out how old the sediment are actually. If we take from a reservoir bottom, then sediment, because the life of reservoirs could be 50 years, 100 years. So, obviously, the sediments that is deposited could also have a longer life of 50 years to 100 years. So, that is basically the idea of collecting using these scoops or cores kind of samples in this case. Then coming to sediment sampling methods, there are several possible methods, but we will confine our discussion only to two types, that is slot sampling and grab sampling. These are the two sampling methods we will discuss in the class. And let us start with the slot sampling. That slot samplers are used in any erosion studies from small test plots to watershed of several square kilometers. That means, there is no limit. I mean, the various kinds of slot samplers are available, which can be used for smaller or larger study area. And these samplers are typically automatic, and no observer is required during the operation. So, all around the clock data could be obtained, and also the sampling could continue under heavy runoff events. So, various limitations which are there with the runoff plots, they can be taken care of using the slot samplers. And the two main types of slot samplers are multi-slot divisor and COSHOCTON type of runoff sampler. These are the two types of major runoff samplers which are used in this case. So, let us talk about the first kind of sampler, slot sampler, that is multi-slot divisor. And multi-slot divisor is useful for measuring runoff and soil loss from small plots. So, this is the qualifying statement that multi-slot divisors are preferred for small plots. And typically, these multi-slot divisors have three parts: slot divisor, collection tank and cistern tank. So, here you can see here the slot divisor, which is the major component, that is here you can see. So, basically this is the flow direction, and the water or sediment laden water enters the divisor. It gets there are slot divisors here. So, sample gets divided into the central one, and then it finally reaches the collection tank and cistern tank, where it gets collected and where the sediment characteristics or the not only characteristics, but also the quantity and quality of samples are analyzed. The details of slot divisor are given here. It is always provided with the odd number of slots. So, these are the slots as you can see here. So, the slots are always provided in odd numbers, and the middle slot is connected to the cistern tank to collect the excess runoff. So, as we saw in the previous also, it is always the middle slot which is collected, which is used for collection of the water or sediment laden water. Then collection tank has 4 compartments of different dimensions, and the typical dimension of a collection tank are 1.5 meters to 2 meters times 0.62 meters. And the type of compartments that are used or the or various kinds of sophistications are possible. There they could have certain provisions for pumping water out, they could have a floating chamber, that is a float could be there which can automatically record the water level, and so on so forth. So, these various variations are possible, or what is there in these collection tanks and what are the 4 compartments about. And then finally, we have a cistern tank, which is nothing but a circular drum, and this cylindrical shape with a lid provided to the tank, which is quite obvious. So, to cover any kind of foreign elements entering the sample, and typically it is installed at a height of 5 to 10 centimeters from the ground to avoid corrosion, because it is typically metallic cylinder. And this one is connected to slot divisor, as you can see here, this is connected to slot divisor. So, the water sample gets collected here, and the capacity of drum is typically 500 liters with radius of 0.42 meters and height of 0.9. This is a typical value, but any variations are possible as far as cistern tanks size and dimensions are concerned. Then coming to procedure of layout, basically just to an idea about how in field conditions these are used. So, for conducting an experiment, we have to select a particular place with a slope of say 60 and 90%. Let us say for example, the slope could vary, and after making the area into slopes of 60 and 90%, the soil is compressed to be firm. So, soil conditions have to be made such that they are in natural condition, that is bulk density of the soil of the natural soil condition has to be preserved. And then after completing the plot area, it is separated into 4 plots, as you can see here, different plots are created, and dimension of plots typically are kept 15 meter by 4 meter in both the slope conditions. And the separation is done typically by GI sheets. So, you see that GI sheets are being used for creating the separate plots, and runoff connection channels are constructed for each plot to collect the runoff. So, that is outside this area there is a runoff collection channel also is collected. And then we have to create these pits here, as you can see here, of varying sizes, typical size 3.6 meter into 1.4 meter to install runoff tank, and of course, the cistern tank is also installed in this pit by extending the length if required. And connection tank installed, the pit is divided into 4 components with that we have seen, and then runoff tank is connected with the slot divisor to collect excess runoff into cistern. So, from these plots multi-slot divisor is put here, and then it is being collected into tanks. And once the runoff water is collected into the compartment, the total its volume is calculated by measuring the height. So, once height is measured, we know the dimensions. So, total volume we can know, and then finally, runoff water is stirred well in tank to make the soil distribution uniform in water, and then runoff water filled into 2 bottles of 1 liter each, and these bottles are analyzed in lab for soil loss. So, soil loss measurement is done in laboratory conditions, and once we know the total runoff volume, then and the area we known. So, the magnitude of runoff is calculated, and then obviously, under laboratory conditions we can find out what is the total dry weight of the soil that has been collected in samples, and the soil loss then can be estimated in kg per hectare. So, runoff in liters, soil loss in kg per liter, and then obviously, for area we can also always use, or for unit we can always conversion of unit we can use. Then the next type of sampler is COSHOCTON type runoff sampler, and it collects and concentrates runoff from test plot or natural watershed. So, the first one multi-slot divisor was from a small plot, this can be used from large watersheds as well. And here the collected water falls on a water wheel. So, this is a water wheel basically on which the collected water from here falls, and this water wheel is slightly inclined, therefore, causing the wheel to rotate. So, because it is slightly inclined, so whenever big water falls here, because of the momentum, this wheels start rotating, and then an elevated sampling plot mounted on the wheel is used for extracting the sample of water sediment mixture with the representative proportion. And just now as we saw, the total volume of runoff can be measured, and from analyzing this sample we can find out how much soil loss is there, soil weight is how much weight of the dry soil can be found out, and then the proportional soil loss in kg per hectare where we can calculate for COSHOCTON type wheels also, like we did in multi-slot divisor. Then the other case is which we discussed is of grab sampling, that is and grab sampling is the simplest way of taking a sample. So, here a container is dipped into the stream at a point where it will be the water and sediment will be well mixed, typically 300 millimeter below the surface is recommended, and then sediment contained in the major volume of water is filtered, dried and weighed, and then finally, we can find out the total soil loss from a given area. And grab samplers could be of various kinds. So, they can have a set of jaws that shut, say for example, here. So, wherever you want you can shut them, so that sediment sample gets collected, or they can be a bucket shape which rotates into the sediment laden water for collecting the sample. So, as you can see here, the soil sample is collected, and typically grab samplers are preferred because they are easy to handle, they are easy to maintain and easy to use, and they are quite economical also, they are moderately priced. So, that is why these grab samplers are quite commonly used. So, with this we come to end of this. So, soil loss measurement we saw either we can use runoff plots or sediment samplers, and as far as sediment sampling is concerned, we saw multi-slot divisor, we saw COSHOCTON type of wheel, or simply grab samplers can be used for getting the samples and then using laboratory experiments, knowing the volume of water and the magnitude of soil, we can find out what is the total magnitude of soil loss from a given area. Thank you very much.